Thank you so much for organizing this important meeting, and I look forward to having more of these. When it comes to China, I think there's certainly lots of great and important discussions we could and should have about problems in the Chinese society, lack of free speech, human rights issues, labor issues. But when I hear it coming from leaders in the US, whether they're from the Democratic or Republican side, it makes me quite angry because I know that they're doing it for ulterior motives. When you hear US leaders decry the lack of free speech in China at a time when we have thugs from the military and the police department on our streets, tear gassing and shooting rubber bullets at peaceful demonstrators, it's hard to take them seriously. When you hear the decrying of the treatment of the Uyghurs in China, it's hard to take it seriously from people in both parties who have been supporting the 2-decade now war on Muslims throughout the world. US involved in bombing 7 Muslim countries and torturing Muslims at Abu Ghraib, at throwing them into prisons in Guantanamo, at contributing to starving Muslim children in Yemen by supplying the Saudis with the bombs, banning Muslims from entering the United States, laying the groundwork for an attack on Muslims throughout the US, and now turning that into an attack on Asians, particularly Chinese students, Chinese researchers, Chinese scientists, closing down Confucian centers at various universities, and having now literally thousands of FBI investigations against Chinese that harken back to the witch hunt against the Japanese in World War II. So these real discussions about shortcomings in Chinese societies are not going to come from leaders in the US. What is most ludicrous is to hear those US leaders talking about a new Chinese aggression when the US has over 800 military bases around the world, including surrounding China, when the US has now in the South Chinese Seas 2 giant aircraft carriers, 6 nuclear submarines, and let's remember that when it comes to nuclear weapons, the US has 6,000 compared to China with 300. And the US military exercise that are conducted every 2 years called the Rim of the Pacific off the waters of Hawaii, where the last time it involved over 20,000 US military. My worry is that what we have been hearing about China will only be escalated because of the coronavirus and because the economic problems that are going to result from that, where China is going to be a lot quicker than the United States at recovering from those problems and will continue its initiative like the Belt and Road Initiative that include over 100 countries, and the US is going to try to stop that. It's not just an issue about economic competition, but we know that the US military industrial complex is always looking for an enemy. And there has been a call now for years to pivot to Asia, meaning stop the US focus on the Middle East, try to get the US out of those 20-year wars. There's even calls now to withdraw military from some places inside of Europe, reposition them, but to focus on Asia. And we see this now in the US military budget that is just being voted on right now. There was a defeat in an effort to cut down the US military budget by 10%. And the people who voted against it were the vast majority of certainly Republicans, but also Democrats. And the call to pass this new $740 billion budget in the United States, saying we needed that to counter adversaries like China. There was a US senator, not a particularly hawkish one, Mitt Romney, who has said that we have to have this massive US military budget to counter China's new aggression. When we know that China's military budget of $178 billion now compared to the 740 billion in the United States, is ridiculous. He also said, imagine the consequences when a nation that does not believe in human rights with only one party, when they have the overwhelming military force in the world, and that's where we are headed. And so the new US military budget includes billions of dollars more for a, quote, defensive ring around Guam, for increased stockpiles of long-range weapons around the Pacific, and for an extra $20 billion to be spent in the coming years on new radar warning systems and cruise missiles, greater military exercises in the region, deployment of additional forces, and new intelligence sharing centers with our allies in the Pacific. And so I want to echo what John Ross has just said about the need for education in our countries. I'm very upset because in the United States, we see 2/3 of Americans have an unfavorable view of China. That's up 20% since Trump came to power. While we are calling for a pivot to peace, not a pivot to Asia, we have to recognize that massive education needs to be done in our own countries to explain that China is not our enemy, that the Chinese people are not our enemy, and that we do need to work together more than ever to solve the problem of coronavirus, to find new treatments, to find new vaccines, to deal with the crisis of the environment, to deal with the crisis on the Korean Peninsula that can only be solved with the help of China. So I look forward to more discussions like these and more ways that we can work together internationally to say to the people of the world, China is not our enemy. The Chinese people are not our enemy. We call for cooperation and peace with our Chinese brothers and sisters. Thank you.